Welcome to Standing in the Sunlight with Cynthia Rose. We are all on an ever-unfolding unique journey. Join Cynthia Rose as she begins her unique perspective to all that is meaningful. Topics and personalities that support your path, bringing inspiration and passion and heart-centered ways to live a more fulfilling life. A down-to-earth and uplifting sharing of what it means to be spiritual, creative, and living life to the fullest by standing in the sunlight. Born an intuitive medium, Cynthia Rose is also an ordained minister, singer, astrologer, educator, and writer. She has studied the intuitive and healing arts for over 40 years. Rise up and stand in your sunlight now with Cynthia Rose.
Well, hello, good afternoon where I'm from, maybe good morning or good evening where you are. I'm Cynthia Rose, your host. Just a couple of housekeeping things for you. There is a way to connect on the Cynthia Rose Medium Facebook group. Brendan is there. He'll let you in. There is also Cynthia Rose Medium on Facebook. You can connect with me there. You find me on YouTube and Instagram. And Twitter, though I'm not there much, all under Cynthia Rose Medium. So that being said, today we have a guest. We have a little bit of an echo. I wonder if we have a radio on in the background or something. So we have a guest today who's talking about a really important topic for our time. Addiction is a big problem. I'm going to read a little bit about Joe Schrank, our guest, and then bring him on the show. Totally abstinent from all intoxicating substances for nearly 20 years, Joe Schrank is, I hope I'm saying that right, is a clinical social worker, journalist, public speaker, and policy advocate. As a young man at the University of Southern California, Joe medicated his depression with alcohol and avoidance. His road to stable mental health led to a social work program at Iona College, then a master's degree program at the University of Illinois. From there, Joe worked as a residential therapist at Promises in Malibu, California. In 2004, Joe returned to New York City, where he opened the first transitional living facility. Frustrated with the lack of media coverage about addiction and mental health, he founded thefix.com in 2010. Joe is a founding member of Sobriety, Learning, and Motivation, which established the first recovery program in a New York City public school. Wow, that's great. He has facilitated countless interventions, managed innumerable crises, and successfully navigated many court entanglements. Joe has had many positive outcomes with his 1-1 in vivo treatment protocol. He's a frequent contributor to Salon, Daily Beast, Huffington Post, and Fox News. He believes addiction is the health crisis of the modern age, and I would tend to agree with him. Joe lives in Brooklyn with his 2 boys who have never seen him drink. With more than 20 years' experience as a social worker in the addiction and mental health space, Joe can help with any situation that arises. Joe, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you so much
Hi.
for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you on the radio here.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to talking to you. And I will mention your website at the end of the show in case anybody's interested, but I'm just going to say for now it's denialends.com, but we will say everything at the end as well, so don't worry if you're listening and can't write it down. So addiction, I think I'm happy to have you on the show. It is a big problem everywhere, and so many lives are ruined.
Without question, it's a very long-reaching problem, right? So just for example, we know that there are 13 million children under the age of 18 who are living with a parent in need of treatment. That has long-reaching effects on their emotional health, on their functionality, and what they're able to achieve. And maybe most concerning is that a large number of those go on to be alcoholics themselves or to marry them. And so marrying, it just keeps the whole system going. It keeps the whole chaos going. So one of my big pieces of advocacy is for, children of alcoholics, which is a very tough road. It's a long, hard road. And we know that we're in the middle of a health crisis with the opiate overdose crisis, which is really, really important. But I think it's equally important to understand that with the number of people who die from an overdose, there's twice that number of people who drink themselves to death annually.
Really?
So there's 88,000. Yeah, there's 88,000 Americans who die from some kind of drinking cause. That doesn't actually include liver failure. It doesn't include a lot of things. That we know that alcohol fuels certain cancers. There's lots of different health considerations when people are consistent drinkers. So that's an important thing because, I feel like America is, first of all, we love alcohol. There's no question about that. We're steeped in alcohol, but we've normalized this experience to the point where it's just detrimental to society. And this whole issue with Brett Kavanaugh has kind of brought it to the forefront in my mind. I see a lot of people, and some of the comments, on the news have been, well, it's a rite of passage. What are you going to do, right? It's a rite of passage. It's part of the maturation process, this binge drinking culture among youth. And it is, but it shouldn't be. And we should be more aware of it. I always say, and
absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I say to college audiences, look, my mother said, and she says, oh, well, sure, everybody smoked when they were pregnant in the 60s. Really, did they? And that's unconscionable today to think of pregnant women smoking. And I feel like we should make this binge drinking culture among youth as unconscionable. There hopefully will be a day in America when we look back and think, oh my God, college kids used to do shots of vodka and go to the hospital, and that it needs to be eradicated from the culture.
I agree that my husband and I mean, something that I say, we don't watch a lot of TV, but we do watch certain shows by choice, that we get, and a lot of them are from a certain network, but I'm not going to say anything like that. But the thing that's become, like I say, look at that, they've got a drink in their hand. Like all these shows, they've always got a drink in their hand, or they've always got a reason to have a drink. It's like something I've noticed, and it's something that, I went through as a youth, is that people go for a picnic in the 80s and there was wine or beer there, and I'd be like, why? It's beautiful. Why do we need it? But I was lucky. I was one of those people that couldn't really drink. One drink and the hangover would come in half an hour. So I was kind of lucky. My mom used to say, you're lucky. I didn't know what that meant, but it is such it's so normalized in society. And I can remember my own son not being included in some certain school things because he didn't want to get drunk.
Right. Right. Well, that's something that a lot of young people face. And, we hear that a lot. I live in a very skewed world because the young people that I see are generally already impaired by alcohol. But I try to speak to college audiences, and it's difficult because oftentimes college presidents don't like my message, which is safety first, right? We love door number one, no form of intoxication. That's the door that we would love all of the young people in our lives to walk through. Door number two is this secretive, in the dorms or wherever, this sort of business of shots and all that. Like, let's get rid of that, because that's when kids hurt themselves and go to the hospital. Door number three is beer and cannabis. We don't love the idea of that, but nobody, there is no lethal dose of cannabis. There's no long-term, it's questionable. There are certainly people who have negative reactions. It's certainly not without risk, but it is by far the safest form of intoxication. So that's a tough conversation to have. It's like having that conversation with, if you're the parent of boys, which is, look, we like the idea of no sexual activity because it makes us uncomfortable as parents, but here are some condoms because this is important to protect your health and to be respectful. Yeah. So it's a hard thing because kids misinterpret, oh, okay, and I can't tell you how many emails I get after speaking to a college audience. You told our kids to smoke pot? Well, no, not exactly. That's not exactly what I was saying. But so it's there are no easy answers with America's love affair with intoxication. I have come to the conclusion that we will not be a drug-free society. We're, unfortunately, from my point of view, we're not going to be a gun-free society, nor are we going to be a junk food-free society. So we need to start valuing improvement, and we need to start chipping away at this problem and making it better. In my mind, the first layer of that is, in fact, safety, because nobody finds any measure of recovery or any stability with their mental health if they hurt themselves permanently or die. And that's a very real possibility, one that I don't think we discuss nearly enough.
Yeah, that's true. So you're not actually advocating, from what I understand, for people to smoke pot, but you're talking about people that already have a serious addiction, as this is a transition. Is that my understanding?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the things that we do, and we know this from research, is that states that have medicinally dispensed, safe, legal, and accessible cannabis have 25% fewer overdose deaths than states that don't. So the question is, okay, does that have value, and can cannabis be a transitional phase, a way out of severe addictions to, say, opiates, benzodiazepines, alcohol? In my mind, when I'm looking at people who are asking for help or they want to change their lives, I want to respect any positive change, right? I don't feel it's correct or appropriate to say, well, you didn't do it right. Okay, well, we have to value people and we have to meet them where they are and respect them as individuals. And so if people are willing to go some of the way, if they're not willing to go all of the way that we would want them to, or where that would make us comfortable, that's a very different story. So if somebody says to me, look, I use heroin, I'd like to stop using heroin, but I'm going to use cannabis. My response is, I think that's a good decision. How can we help you do that, and how can we help you be safer? The question becomes later, maybe cessation of cannabis use would then be appropriate. We've had that outcome many times. We've had young guys say, they go back to school and, okay, well, they took a, kind of low-level introductory type course, and then start taking, the building process. Well, they're going to take something more challenging, and maybe they're going to have to stop using cannabis. There are also, I believe, medicinal indicators, and there are things that cannabis can be helpful for. My mother has found great success managing arthritis, pain, discomfort, inflammation, using cannabis, and she's eliminated Vicodin. That's a terrific outcome.
That's fantastic. And I've heard that from many people, that their parents have severe arthritis, and they have something in the evening, helps relax them, and they get good rest and sleep. And we all know if we don't sleep, that our body can't recover.
That's true. And, and look, there are lots of older people who can misuse, whether it's intentional or not, but misuse dangerous pharmaceuticals. If the risk for misusing cannabis is pretty low. So in other words, if they take if they should take one edible and they take two, nothing really happens. If they misuse Vicodin or some of these other prescriptions, they might be going to the hospital. So I think that we need to start looking at this in a much more realistic way, rather than the moral posturing of what people should do. And that's part of the issue with what's wrong with drug policy in America. It is not under the umbrella of public health, that sort of composite of people who work in public health, whether it's physicians, social workers. It's under the umbrella of the jurisprudence system, and that's wrong. It's wrong for a bunch of different reasons. Whatever drug use is, in my mind, it's not crime. Maybe it's a bad decision, maybe it's a harmful decision, maybe it's a bunch of different things, but I don't think of it as a criminal behavior. And to have it handled by people whose expertise is crime is just wrong. It shouldn't be that way. It should be much more in my view, the Canadian or European model, which is handled by health ministries to legitimately help people and legitimately improve the quality of their lives, rather than destroying their lives by incarcerating them.
Yeah. Well, I've always wondered why it is that, like, we might take care of our physical health, but we don't consider that the same as our mental health, because
Yes.
if we don't have good mental health, we don't have a good life. We don't have good physical health, we don't have a good life. And I've always found it kind of strange that they're separated.
Yes. Well, that they're separated, and B, that mental health is thrown by the wayside. I mean, as we get older and we have annual physicals, we don't have any sort of checkup about our mental or emotional health, and we should. We should also, in addition to seeing the doctor for screenings of whatever cancers and hypertensive issues and so on and so forth, and all the things that they do at a physical, we should probably also be seeing clinical social workers or some other helping profession discipline to check in with our emotional and mental health as well, because we experience different things as we go through life, right? What was once okay is no longer okay, I think that's important. I think that if we're proactive about our mental health, the outcomes are better the same way if we're proactive about our physical health.
I agree, but there's all these stigmatisms that have to go. I mean, if, I went to the doctor and had said, look, I'm communicating with people that have crossed over, they could have easily locked me up, but it's not a problem. I'm in a good state and I'm happy in my life, and I know I'm not going to get into talking about that, but I'm just saying that there are times that people have something going on and they don't feel safe to talk about it. That's a whole other show that we could do. I know we're talking more about
absolutely. Look, stigma
addiction,
I think is well, but the conversation quickly gets to be about stigma, because one of the reasons there's a tremendous amount of stigma, and that's one of the big hurdles for people finding help.
Yeah. Oh, I can't believe we're at 20 minutes. Okay, grab a glass of water, and we'll be back with Joe Schrank in just a couple of minutes. Wow.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. Om Times, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hi, this is recording artist and composer Yuval Ran, inviting you to a voyage through the chakras, a new double album of guided meditations to transform your life, a sublime musical medicine for nourishing inner peace and reaching to your higher virtues. Get it now at metamindfulnessmusic.com, METTA mindfulnessmusic.com.
Some knowledge belongs to us and us alone. The way our girlfriends walk, talk, touch their hair. Details that only a sister can know about her girls. But what about our other girls? The ones we carry with us every day. Our bond with our sister girls gives life. But knowing your breasts can save it. Go to knowyourgirls.org for the facts you need on breast health. Brought to you by Susan G. Komen and the Ad Council.
Okay, we're back with Joe Schrank talking about addiction. We were just talking about stigmatism and attitudes that may be getting in the way of helping deal with the opioid crisis and alcohol crisis. So what?
Yeah,
I think.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, look, stigma is something that we fight all the time. You know, we have criminalized drug use to the point where people feel as though their drug use makes them bad people. It does not. You know, their behavior under the influence of drugs might be criminal behavior, but in and of itself, it doesn't. And so I think that one of our big missions is to just deliver that message specifically to young men who have a difficult time asking for help and feel weak or whatever they think, entering mental health systems that, you know, look, it's okay. Life is not easy. It's not easy for anybody, whether you have lots of money or no money. You know, we all get our challenges in life, and it's okay. We all need each other. You know, we all need each other. I think that the stigma for women is different, but very prevalent. And I think that for women looking for help with a drinking or drug use issue, it's equally difficult, but in a different way. You know, society really, really looks down on women with drinking problems.
Well, that's true, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, people look, well, how could she? She has children. You know, there's sort of that kind of an attitude, and it's an additional invitation for secrecy. And I think that we need to bring it out into the open. It's like a family, right? We can't, if we ignore the problem, we can't address the problem. And America ignores its addiction problem. America is a giant dysfunctional family, not talking about the problems associated with intoxication.
Yeah, I remember reading a paper once about the shadow side of society, which included all of that, and I thought, never thought of that, because we all are one people. So there is definitely those stigmatisms. You know, I'm going to just play a little bit of devil's advocate for those people. Like, you know, for example, I was talking to a friend who said years ago somebody gave them a cookie or something because they weren't feeling well and they didn't feel anything, and they had 3 or 4 cookies and infused with marijuana.
Right.
And they were like, oh, you know, they said they ended up in the hospital, and I'm thinking maybe there was some paranoia or something with that, and they said it was really awful. But then again, it makes me wonder, like, they were paranoid, and then they got there and there was that probably shunning of, look what you did to yourself.
Well, look, I think that the consequence, while scary, is low, right? This person, if they had abused some other substance, could have been dead. So every ER nurse knows if people come into the ER because they've ingested marijuana and they're scared, you reassure them, and then you let them go in a couple of hours. It's not that there isn't consequence with cannabis use, but dosing matters. And this is a very common thing that we've heard among people who do use edibles, is that it takes time for it to sort of move in. And so lots of times people think exactly what you just said was, well, I don't feel anything, and they eat more of it, and then it all happens suddenly. So I think that, in my view, any sort of cannabis use, and we're lucky in California that you can talk to a doctor about it. You can talk to a doctor if it's an appropriate thing to do, if it's not an appropriate thing to do, if you're better off with some form of cannabis over some form of alcohol for relaxation, if it can help you sleep. And there are people who have negative responses to anything. There are millions of children ate peanut butter and jelly today in America, and they were just fine. There were some kids who had a very strong and negative reaction to that. So
That's true.
It's kind of one of those things. So not everybody is an appropriate candidate to use cannabis. I think that people always find it interesting. I'm not a cannabis user. I don't use it in any form. But as an advocate for people to be safer and healthier, I don't think it can be taken off the table for discussion on an individual or cultural basis. So when people tell me that, oh, I did this and it scared me, that's one person. We have to keep that in mind, that whenever we're talking about policy, we're not talking about any one person. It just means that individual person, maybe it's not the right fit for them. No medication is right for all people.
Yeah, well said. The other thing, though, is I think doctors need more training. We knew somebody a couple of years ago as well who said, and we're in Colorado, so it's legal here. And somebody who was having back surgery, and a family suggested that maybe, I don't remember if it was actually marijuana or CBDs, but the doctor, when they brought it up with their doctor said, I can't condone any of that, didn't want to know anything about it. And there seems to be growing research that people that use CBDs recover from surgery faster, but they didn't want to go against their doctor's wishes. So if they did, they would have had to do it against their doctor's wishes.
Right. And I think that, we have to remember that health is a collaborative thing. And the doctor's opinion matters, but so does the individual person's opinion matters. What's troubling about that scenario that you just gave is that person left with probably an OxyContin prescription to manage pain post-surgery. The cannabis would have had no interactions with the OxyContin prescription, and so maybe the person could have used less of what can be a very potentially dangerous drug, or not use that at all. Maybe they would have good success with managing pain just with cannabis. So I think it is a conversation to have. It kind of amazes me that in America, you can walk to CVS, you can get a bottle of Vicodin, you can buy a bottle of alcohol on sale, and you can go home and you can die ingesting those substances. But by introducing the potential of cannabis, there's a million questions, and I can't be involved in any of that, and so on and so forth, with a substance that has no lethal dose. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me in certain populations, one of them being young guys that we see who are vets. They have trauma, they have chronic pain, they have lots of reasons and indicators that cannabis may be a helpful thing for them, but the VA does not allow for that. So a 28-year-old young man who has severe nightmares and trauma from combat, I'm sorry, my dog is, that has severe nightmares and chronic pain, giving him cannabis to manage some of those symptoms, even under medical supervision, is not, that's criminalized. Giving him alcohol, Vicodin, Valium, so on and so forth, and a gun, he can go home with that and be in complete compliance with VA policy and law. And that is absolutely wrong. That is just a wrong approach. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. But that is the state of drug policy in America. And so I have a difficult time communicating that I am not telling people to use cannabis. I'm telling them to consider that option because it might be helpful and it might be a better option than the pharmaceuticals that are being pushed on us here in America.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada, and the fentanyl crisis there is just horrible. Like, it's just horrible. And I know they say the downtown east side there is like one of the worst in Canada. I mean, I grew up there, so, I haven't seen the way it is, but I do know people that have worked down on the streets. There's somebody that all they do is they go on the streets and they're trying to keep people safe with what they do. And you think of the people know they're so addicted to heroin or other things they're addicted to that they'll take fentanyl and almost overdose 3 times and still take it.
Oh, absolutely. Look, there's no logic. Logic never applies when we're talking about addiction. And people think that all the time. No, it doesn't ever apply. And lots of people say, oh, well, they overdosed, so now they're going to learn their lesson. Not really. I mean, a lot of times if people are hit with Narcan, If they are overdosing and an emergency person or a friend uses Narcan, which reverses the reception of opiates so the person starts breathing again, people are often shocked that the individual that was hit with Narcan is upset. Hey, man, you ruined my high. I was fine. People find that one unbelievable, and it kind of is. But that, to me, is the pull and the power of addiction. Like, that's what we're fighting. And to try to apply logic of, well, you should stop using heroin, they do know that. People who are addicted to heroin, they understand that. They understand that it's not a good thing to do. The question is, how do we pull them out of the mire and out of that ditch? One of the ways that we can help them do that is with partnering and a therapeutic alliance and saying, look, it's really hard. Giving up opiates is going to be really hard. You're going to be depressed. You're going to be anxious. But part of the reason to utilize cannabis in that particular instance is because it's softer landing. It's more compassionate. People can sustain it longer. People have a better chance. I mean, if we got somebody off of heroin and onto medicinal cannabis, 90 days later, we're having very different conversations with a very different person. And so the whole notion of go to rehab for 30 days, like it's a light switch, and then learn your lesson and get a poster of Nancy Reagan and never use drugs again, is fantasy. As much as we see that on television, it is fantasy.
And so I wanted to ask you about that. So you've worked in rehab centers, and you've seen, what's your experience of that?
Well, look, I think that people who are motivated can do well in rehab, right? There are people who do well with the traditional paradigm of how we approach addiction treatment, which is indoctrination into a 12-step lifestyle. That works 3 to 5% of the time. And so my view is, well... Only
3 to 5%? Wow. Yeah. Okay.
3 to 5%.
Wow.
So my view is, how can we do that? How is that smart, compassionate to recommend something that only works 3 to 5% of the time? So my approach of, look, let's get into the process of improvement. Let's forget the results. One of the reasons to say, look, if we can get rid of all the things that are going to hurt you, alcohol, pharmaceuticals mixed with alcohol or inappropriately used, heroin, so on and so forth, we can continue to improve. And just as a very quick example, I had a 70-year-old client who was effectively drinking himself to death. He was isolated. He was lonely. His wife had passed away from breast cancer. He was alienating his family with his behaviors. He was very aggressive and unpleasant. I thought he was funny. No one else seems to find any humor in his sense of humor. But, excuse me, so the short version of the story is we got him off of alcohol and onto a vape pen, a cannabis vape pen for stress reduction. When he was watching the news at home, he lost 20 pounds, his blood pressure dropped, he was a more pleasant person. He agreed to some things that needed to happen in his life, like scaling down his home, having help. So the traditional rehab would say, well, you failed. This man is not drug-free. My view is, well, but all these other really good things happened. His health, his physical health improved, his mental health improved, his engagement in the community improved. His daughters were like, well, we didn't know he could be a remotely pleasant person. So that's really, I think, what we need to do is we need to shift into the idea of how do we make small, successful changes and build on that rather than tell people you have this one thing to do, and if you don't do it, you're a failure. Like, that to me is just not right. It just isn't right, and it does not inspire change. And it's the only area of healthcare that we do that. If we have a friend that needs to lose 60 pounds and they lose 30, we say, you're doing great. You look terrific, and keep going. What are you doing? How's that going? That's great. Keep going. But a person with a drug use problem, we don't say, you're trending in the right direction and you're doing really great. And how can I help you continue to do that? We tell them they're unwilling. We tell them they're failures. We tell them they're liars. You're killing your mother. All of this stuff. So I think that we need to rethink entirely how we approach addiction, and we're not very successful. We have a big body count every day. Every day we have a body count.
Yeah, and like you said, all the other parts of it, I mean, there's just so many implications that come out of that. You can have children born, with the fetal alcohol syndrome, then they have to deal with that for the rest of their life. If you've been a drinker as a parent, there's just the family. It's a ripple effect. Everybody affects everybody. I agree with you. It is such a problem, and this is what brings me back to the fact that people are in pain. Sometimes they're in physical pain, but they could also be in mental pain, because when addiction is they're suffering, they're in pain. We can't really say that's right or wrong. They're just in pain and they need help.
Yeah, that's correct. Look, we don't. There are reasons that people abuse substances, right? So the first layer of any kind of engagement with somebody in a process of change is to, okay, well, what are we going to do about the substance? But there are reasons that people did that. Unresolved grief is one of them. Sometimes we find secondary mental health issues, depression, anxiety. There are lots of different things of how somebody got that way. I think one of the biggest ways is disconnection from people and the community. We're very big on engagement and getting moving into the community. That's a big part of what I think helps people stay clean and sober or improved. The ancient Greeks had one treatment plan for mental illness, and they said, be not idle, be not alone. And that holds true today. Do something and do it with somebody. Whether you're walking in the park with a friend or helping at your church for whatever reason or whatever feels right, that's an important thing.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we're at our second break already. We'll be back in a couple minutes with Joe Schrank. We're taking calls. If you want to call in, don't be shy.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Tune in to The Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.